everyone. Welcome to Flipping the Barrel, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of energy leaders across our industry and find out more about their career and life journeys. Today, we have Megan Tarrant, the CEO of Clements Fluids. Megan's journey is a powerful story of leadership and resilience. From dreaming of law school to stepping into the family business, she's navigated personal and professional challenges, ultimately becoming CEO in 2019. Megan's leadership has been key in navigating crises, and we'll get into that in the podcast, building a sustainable business and empowering women in leadership. Join us as we dive into her inspiring journey and the lessons she's learned along the way. And Megan, when I met you and I was hearing about your story, and I just thought it was absolutely incredible as a family-owned business for the things that you went through and what you have done to become CEO today. It was definitely not handed to you, and you worked very hard to get where you're at. And so excited for our listeners to know more about you and about Clements Fluids, which has been a part of your life since you were little. So let's just jump right into it. And thank you so much, Megan, for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. Everything that you said means more than you know. But yes, definitely by God's grace am I in this position. So very thankful and honored to be your guest.
Thank you, Megan. And what I love, really, just reflecting back on this a little bit, is we've done over 150 episodes and no story is the same. And this is just so unique as well. And so I love that everybody just has a different journey, and yours is one that we're going to get into today, which I'm very excited. So Megan, we always start from the beginning, a little bit of just how your story really started. And your parents started Clements Fluids in 1985, the same year that you were born. And even though you had, like Jamie mentioned, big dreams to go into law school and definitely not be in the family business, and you even wanted to be the first woman president, which, by the way, is still on the table, very still possible to happen.
I don't think it's possible at this point,
but even though those were kind of like your aspirations, you ended up joining the family business, even though you had no intentions to really ever work with your parents or be part of it. But eventually even your husband joined with you the family business. And just tell us a little bit about that. When did that kind of came to fruition? What made you decide to make that change in path? And how did you and your husband, compromise so much of like what you wanted to do outside of the family business and now both work there? It's just so interesting how it all happened.
Well, the real sacrifice that was made was by my husband. He willingly gave up his desire to be a coach in order to provide for our family and really to make me happy. For me, it just made sense because at the time we were young and in love, and the only thing that really mattered was just getting married and our family's future. So for me, it made sense. I knew I wanted to start a family with Chase. But honestly, there was a moment in time when we were engaged and we were driving home from visiting Chase's family, and his family had an intervention with Chase and was like, "Are you sure that you want to give up your dream? You've always wanted to be a coach to work at Clements Fluids." So, my promise to him was that he could coach our kids. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But my parents really modeled for me what it meant to sacrifice for your family. My parents put everything that they had into Clements Fluids, all their time, energy, and effort. And in others' eyes, it may have looked like it was for selfish ambition, but I really knew their heart. It was for us. It was for our future and for the nonprofits that they supported through the foundation that drove them daily. I always knew that I wanted to be a career woman. Originally, I thought that career path was going to be through law school and to be the first woman president. However, my dreams really shifted. I believe that this was God showing me that I could do both. I could be a devoted mom and wife and a career woman all at the same time.
When we were meeting and talking, what I thought was really interesting was the relationship with Chase and how he came into the business. And also, I remember when you were speaking about your father, he, didn't have intentions of you working in oil and gas particularly. And so he was like, hey, for a business field, you could do accounting. And so you ended up going to school for accounting. And then meanwhile, Chase was on his path to do sales. And so when you went into Clements, you both went there in those respective roles, accounting and sales. Tell us a little bit about how that kind of shaped your background, knowing that originally you went to school getting that business kind of background so you could do more. And then when you started into Clements Fluids, did you feel like any pushback, or because usually when you go and work for your family's business and then also your husband too, there's that sense of like, oh, they're just getting a role because, that daddy is the CEO, or how did you handle that coming right out of college as well?
Well, I've always been stronger in math than in English and in writing. I actually remember a college professor giving me a B plus on a paper and saying that was the highest grade he'd ever given to an accounting major. But I could always put things into numbers. And so for me, accounting just made sense as a background. But when I started in the business, I was an entry level accountant. I was able to really touch every aspect of finance, starting with bookkeeping. I'm not sure if it's a blessing or a curse, but I've always had a desire to improve things. The thinking that there has to be a better way. I'll never forget there was a time when we used to use an adding machine to add up the bills and then manually write a check in the accounting system. And at one point, I forgot to clear out the tab, and I wrote a check for $20,000 more than I was supposed to. And the vendor called and was like, there's a mistake. And so at that point, I was like, wait a minute, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way, because I don't want to put myself at risk, to do that again. It seems so simple. Well, I presented this idea to the office manager, and she was technically over me. She was my boss, and my parents were really strategic about putting people over us that wasn't them in the beginning, especially to help us grow and for our relationship. But she hated the idea. I didn't really let it go because I thought, you know what? If I'm going to be ultimately responsible for this, I have to do something differently. Eventually, she quit. So there was some of that, but I think that starting with the basics of the business as a foundation, paired with my natural tendency to always look for a better way and the willingness to challenge the status quo, asking why did we do things the way we did? It took a very calculated way, and it was really a key to my success in the business. I took on a lot of the relationships that my dad had over the years, and over time, I got confidence to ask questions. Some of the relationships we had really encouraged my curiosity and were so helpful and helped me learn as I grew, but others became offended and were really challenged by 22, 23-year-old with boldness. And so as time went, I moved on from those, and I sought out vendors and consultants who were willing to grow with me in the business. In the beginning, when we started our careers, working in the office was really my only option. My dad always said that the oil field was not a place for a lady. And at the time, that was really kind of true, more so than it is today. But the reputation of women in sales in particular was not good. Coming from my dad and my husband's perspective, I think that they were both just concerned of how to be treated.
No, I totally agree. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, especially, we got to go back into kind of that era where maybe it wasn't as common, or to your point, and even like your father and your husband, they just wanted to protect you as well. Like they just wanted you to be in a good environment, et cetera. So like, I totally understand that. And it's very valid. But I also really like how you mentioned about even early on kind of speaking up. And even though that ruffles feathers when, you want to make changes and like questioning why we're doing things a certain way, I think just says a lot about you and the fact that you probably cared a lot more about these little details because it was your family's business, right? So you're looking at every possibility to make it better. So tell us a little bit, as you kind of moved up and just over the years working at Clements, there was a period in your life where you were trying to balance home, and we all dealt with this, with a little bit of like the motherhood guilt and us really wanting to focus on being home with our kids, and that societal pressure too of, why are you working all the time when you have young children at home? And this was kind of a pivotal point too, where Chase kind of took over the business. And that was a little bit like of an internal conflict for you, just because you didn't want to let go of this career path. You've always mentioned, even from a young age, you wanted big things for yourself. And then you were finding yourself where now you were kind of trying to prioritize family. Can you tell us a little bit about that period and then kind of how you overcame that? Because now you stepped back into a leadership position in the company. Was it just like a period of time that you wanted to be home? And then, as the kids grew up a little bit more, it gave you more freedom to go back?
Well, I'll just say that staying at home is not for everyone. I tried it. I remember even just being home on maternity leave, I had a lot of anxiety and felt almost trapped and suffocated when I was home during the day. I've always been a problem solver, and I found myself creating problems out of boredom in order to solve them. So when I went back to work after having both kids, I really saw a drastic shift in myself and was excited to come home and spend time as a family. I realized even through COVID that I really needed the separation of work and home to be successful in life. Dave Ramsey says it best: be present where your feet are. And when the lines of work and home were blurred for me, even in working from home scenario, I found myself rushing to do the next, whether it was feeding a baby or putting together financial reports. I was not really present because I was rushing to do the next. But I think that when you give yourself permission to be the person that God's called you to be, there's so much freedom. When you really acknowledge the gifts that God has given you and lean into them instead of trying to ignore them, which I was trying to do that, all aspects of your life are easier. There were days when the kids were young and I would take the morning off and go to a play date with the kids and other young moms. And to be honest with you, it was like nails on a chalkboard, uncomfortable for me. I didn't fit in. I was bored out of my mind. And you know what? It really didn't make me a pleasant person to be around either, or a good mom or a wife or an employee. So, I think at the end of the day, it's really just giving yourself permission to be who you're supposed to be.
I'm really glad that we talk about this, Megan, because there's so many times where we question ourselves as moms, like, I should be at home. And then, like, in all reality, the home, like, you at home is not good for anybody, right? Versus
Absolutely.
you working makes it all whole and makes the
Yeah.
family a lot better. So I love that you are able to express that and really share with our listeners, like, hey, that's okay if that's you, because that was me. And now look at where I'm at today and like where the business has gone. I do want to talk about like a really big turning point that I was super shocked when we met that happened. And in 2018, you experienced a major fallout, and I'm really happy that you're able to even share this on the podcast because I wasn't really sure if you would. And you had a fallout with the family, so y'all are all working in the family business. You had been grooming Chase to take that CEO role when really in reality too, you kind of were like, maybe that role was actually for me, but you hadn't experienced, you hadn't had that coaching yet, which you ended up getting some executive coaching, which we'll talk about that as well. But you had a major fallout and you and Chase left the business. So all these years working within it, working hand in hand with your father, y'all stepped away. This really changed the trajectory of Clements Fluids, but more importantly, it really changed the trajectory of you and Chase's relationship, as well as what you're going to come back into the company, and what position you'd be holding at that point. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened with the family and how that really changed everything?
Absolutely. So, when you're not living in your strengths, it can create anger and resentment, anxiety, and every aspect of your life. In 2018, everything had really come to a head. Our business had grown significantly, primarily in headcount, which led to higher overhead, and we didn't have the infrastructure in place to support it. We didn't have the right technology, we didn't have the right leadership structure. It wasn't sustainable, and that created a lot of stress. There was stress in our marriage and in our family. And as much as we wanted to be able to balance the business, our family relationships, both in my parents and with our kids and in our marriage, we didn't have the tools to do it well. Our intentions were always pure. My parents loved us so very much and were so proud of we had become, both personally and professionally. And we knew that. However, the dynamics had gotten too much and too hard for us to handle on our own. So, as I said before, I've always been one to seek out ways to improve things. Again, there's got to be a better way. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Family business is hard. How have other multi-generational businesses made it through this transition? I sought help from family business consultants to try to put best practice in place so that our family could thrive while also building a sustainable business that could last through generational changes. We all agreed to the idea, but when the work started, it was really difficult to not allow the priorities of the business to take over, and they did. So I truly believe that everything happens for a reason and that the struggles that we went through were necessary to get us to where we are today. We all had the right intentions and wanted the best for our family, and that was the real key. We just needed help. We were introduced to a lady by the name of Kristen Parker, who's a family counselor, and she came in and helped us create alignment as a family. She gave us the space to process and the tools to communicate well. We did an exercise just as simple as active listening. And what we didn't realize is what we were saying and what we were hearing were two totally different things. So a real skill to develop. But again, you're probably hearing themes here. I always say this, there has to be a better way. Kristen opened up my mind to the idea of coaching and counseling. Family business can be very rewarding, but it can be also very risky. The two most important things in my life were at risk, both family and business. And I knew that I couldn't afford to not position myself and my family for success by utilizing all of the tools available. So at that point, I was really committed to growth, both professionally and personally. The growth journey that was started with Kristen, she helped me discover. She helped me discover who I was and who I was created to be. I use tools like the Enneagram 8, by the way, Strength Finders, Culture Index, and even a spiritual gifts assessment. And each of them kept pointing me back to leadership. It's funny how God teaches you things through your kids. Our daughter, Michael Ann, was nominated every year at school and elementary for a character award. And each year it was consistently leadership. Many years I would roll my eyes and kind of laugh and say, oh yeah, that girl's bossy. That's very sweet of them to give her a leadership award. It was through this season that God began to work on my own heart as he was trying to reveal to me who he had created me to be. I knew that if I wasn't able to fully acknowledge or understand my own gift of leadership, that I wouldn't be able to nurture and help Michael Ann foster her own God-given gifts. So as I was working with Kristen, the executive coach, and through my counselor, I was really focused on our marriage. I knew that Chase and I needed to position our marriage for success over the business. That was tough. It helped me to see the gifts in Chase as gifts and not shortcomings. What was naturally easy for me was very taxing, and it was hard on Chase, and vice versa. It helped me to see my own husband in a different light. As we were working through these tools, I remember the coach saying, do you think that God would have given you these gifts and expected you to not use them? And that's the thing that really stuck with me and was the cornerstone that I took on the role of CEO from.
Wow. How long was that period? I'm curious of like from the first start that you guys started with the coach and just having discussions with the family. Was that like a few months, a year? What does that look like?
I mean, it was probably like 9 months of really hard. We had a couple of sessions with the family counselor, but then Chase and I started individual coaching from that too, just to grow ourselves, because we knew that, if we were going to take on the business and I was going to potentially be CEO, we needed to work through some things. So, probably 9 months to a year.
That's really cool. I also think like we always encourage people, I hear it quite a bit when we interview C-suite executives, is that importance of coaching or just having that third party person help you realize a lot of the maybe hidden talents that you had or that you don't see yourself, to kind of move into those leadership positions or move into like owning what you're good at. And so I think it's super interesting that you mentioned that. And so another question that we had kind of on the evolution of the business was COVID. And that was, we all know kind of how that went during the pandemic.
Mhm.
But you mentioned it was kind of like a blessing in disguise for Clement Fluids, especially because it gave you the opportunity to prove yourself to the employees, especially as stepping into your new role. And can you just walk us through navigating those types of crises that nobody saw coming, that nobody had coached or prepared you on how to take in such a, big impact to the business? And, what were some of your strategies to kind of reposition the business, refocus, and kind of uh, step up after COVID versus like a lot of companies that struggled through it? You guys did the opposite. You actually grew from it.
Yeah, so at the time, it was really just about how do we survive. From 2016 to 2020, our main business was the service business, which required us to have significant headcount. And this is why our headcount had gone up to 2020. We had to be prepared to jump when our customers said jump. The hardest part about it was there was no commitment from our customers. We had to keep people on the payroll to work these jobs in case our customers needed us.
Mhm.
And it was a really difficult business model to maintain. Our margins were decreasing. I mean, this is all happening right before COVID. And COVID forced us to reshift our focus from the service work to our plant manufacturing operations. Our core products are clear brines and water-based mud used in the life cycle of the well. And we have strategically positioned our plant locations to be close to our customers' operations so that we can add value to them on a daily basis. We want to be a part of the plan. When we are a part of the customer's plan, we can position the customer for success in whatever scenario they find themselves in. We have the ability to produce tens of thousands of barrels of fluid very quickly when a customer experiences a well control situation or incurs unexpected losses. However, where we really shine is where we partner with our customers and become part of their fluid program from the beginning. We want to be the customer's go to for their emergency. I mean, we can totally do that, but we also want to be their day to day provider. I like to say it like this: just as an ambulance parks next to a high school football game on a Friday night and as in anticipation of a potential injury that could be life threatening, we want to position our customer for success by having Clements Fluids as part of their plan. Whether that is for their pre-mix water-based mud used in the intermediate or the safety stock of kill mud and used in case of an emergency. But the key word is partner. Help me help you.
Mhm.
Can we bail you out of an emergency situation? Absolutely, no doubt. We can do it better than anyone in the business, but we can help you shine when we are involved in the entire life cycle process. So that's really been our focus.
I like that you shared that because when we spoke, you mentioned it, and then I honestly heard from customers, Clements Fluids, yeah, whenever I needed somebody to bail me out, they bail me out. And I remember I remember you saying, yeah, but I want to be part of the entire plan. Just to call me when you need me to bail you out.
Yeah.
So I love that you took that initiative to really change the dynamic of how Clements Fluids is viewed. Um, and on that topic, I want us to jump to in 2022 when you officially bought out the family business and gained complete control, which means your status of a women-owned business, which is pat you on the back. That's amazing. We love to hear it. And this is a milestone that you're really passionate about. So talk to us about this because there's so many women that would love to follow in a path like yours, or even want to figure out like, how do I get credit for a woman-owned business? And then on the flip side too, Chase was able to shift towards the coaching that you had been talking about through the whole podcast. Somehow that was really his dream. And he was really able to then transition into that. So both of y'all really found what you've always kind of envisioned for your futures. Tell us a little bit about kind of how that change happened, and then what advice can you give to other women who want to do women-owned businesses as well?
Yes, so I strongly believe that no matter if you're a male or a female, you need to give yourself permission to be the person that God's called you to be. You have to know what is true of you. You are made in the image of God, and He has given you specific strengths for the roles He intended you to fill. When you commit to stewarding the gifts that God has given you, it frees you to excel for God's glory and for others' good. Getting certified as a woman-owned business is a huge accomplishment for me because it gives me the opportunity to share with others and hopefully inspire them to pursue their passions, use their gifts, and not put themselves in a box that limits them to societal norms. In the beginning, it made way more sense to everyone, including myself, that Chase would take over the business from my dad. And that was the original path we were on. We both had to put our passions and gifts aside to be who we thought we were supposed to be by listening to what the world and society said. Now, we are both very comfortable in our own skin. It's taken us some time to get there, 18 years to be exact. But over the past couple of years, we've transitioned Chase out of the day-to-day of the business so that he can have time, energy, and effort to focus on coaching. At any one time, he coaches baseball, soccer, football, and basketball. And it's been really beautiful to see him thrive, but also giving him permission to focus on this has allowed him to be a blessing to other kids and other families. I love the story. Sorry if I cry, it always gets me, but I love the story of Nora on our soccer team. When Nora first joined the soccer team, she didn't speak, like literally, she didn't use words. She was 6 years old and was super shy. She's now 13 and has ran for student council and won. And her parents will tell you, Chase got her out of her shell through soccer, and it has bled over into other parts of her life. Recently, Chase had to write her a letter of recommendation, and we all cried as we read it, including her parents. If you think about some of the most influential people in your life, many of those people are coaches. He definitely leaves a hole in the business, don't get me wrong, but I'll tell you, it's so worth it. In order to fill this hole, I've reorganized the leadership structure and have added an executive leadership team comprised of a VP of sales, VP of ops, chief people officer, chief of staff, and a CFO. And I've formed a strategic advisory board that serves as a guide towards sustainable growth. And Chase has transitioned to that board along with a couple others.
Wow. Honestly, what an incredible story. And I just love the fact of just embracing change and shifting gears and just moving on to a different path that maybe wasn't initially what either of you thought was going to happen. Your parents didn't think it was necessarily going to happen, but it ends up in everybody kind of falls into the right place where they were meant to be. Even though you don't realize it from the beginning that this is where everybody's meant to be, you have to go through challenges, you have to go through discussions, just so many things. But it's really interesting, kind of like you mentioned, that you all are kind of serving your purpose today, but that didn't come easy, right? It came through tribulations and challenges, and also having external people visualize where you are today. So it's really incredible story. The other thing, just like the last question on the success of the business, 2023 marked, Clement Fluids' largest revenue year, and 2024 was another fantastic year. And 2025 is going to be another great year. And just reflecting back on the progress that you've personally made. Have you stepped into this role, transitioning to CEO, still being a great mother, a great wife, having a good relationship with your family, a lot of things that took a lot of effort to develop and kind of become a better version of yourself. And then also seeing all the positive sides on the business where you are seeing your hard work play out into revenue and into growth. How have you taken a step back and visualized what has happened over the last 2-3 years? And what do you attribute that success to since taking over the role? And maybe part 2 question, how has your leadership style evolved along the way from stepping into CEO day one to now as you see the company progress?
Well, I definitely don't have it all figured out, and I probably should pause more and reflect on the journey. But, I'll just sum it up by saying this. You have to be all in. COVID allowed me the opportunity to really roll up my sleeves and make changes to the business that there wasn't a precedent for. I couldn't call my dad and say, hey, what would you do during COVID? It really allowed me to use a crisis as an opportunity to grow the organization in a way that positioned us for a more sustainable business model. it also allowed me to focus on our purpose. As we came out of 2020, my sole focus was really putting on paper, what is our purpose? What is our mission and our values? I'd done some of that in 2018 and 2019, but I hadn't done it all, and it wasn't my focus. It was more of the start. But because of where the business was, we hadn't fully committed to them. So we had them on the wall or on the website, but the organization didn't really live by them. And I knew that I really had to go all in. So I hired a marketing company to help me articulate our purpose in a way that was repeatable and actionable. Because if it was just in my head, it wasn't scalable, and I wasn't going to be able to really attract the right talent or even articulate what I was trying to say. So, if we were going to truly be purpose driven, we needed to define what that meant and allow it to be our North Star. It was the reason I took on the role of CEO. So I had to put it in pen. It needed to be the way that we hired and fired and attracted and repelled talent. My CFO says it best: Clements fluids isn't for everyone. And that's so true. I think the biggest thing I would say shifting is that we're unapologetic about our mission, vision, and our values. And it's brought people from across the country to come work here. And, not everyone, it's not everyone's sauce, right? But when we allow it to be watered down to fit all, it's bland and, not who we're supposed to be. So,
Megan, what I love most about your story is that, yes, it was a family-owned business, but you took it over. You bought it out from your family. And then instead of just running it the way that it always had been done because, hey, it works, you took the initiative to change it, which really says a lot about you and a lot about your tenacity and your ability to speak that vision into play. Because most people just take over the family business and run it as is, and they sit back and they're like, hey, been there, done that. I'm going to just keep it going because it works. Whereas you, once again, went back to what you've done through your whole career and like, we can do this better. How can we do this better? And so thank you today for coming on the podcast and sharing your story and really being able to share that, hey, I made Clements Fluids a better place to not only work, but also to work with. So what you're doing as far as changing the dynamic in the field, I think is so important. And I know we even spoke about some field visits that you even went on, and you're really sinking into the role very nicely and really giving that support across the board. So thank you again, Megan, for your time today. And we're so glad to be able to have you and share your journey on the podcast.
absolutely. Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Yay, we're so glad you liked it. And for all those listening, catch us on the next episode. You can find us on flippingthebarrel.com, Flipping the Barrel on LinkedIn, Flipping the Barrel on Instagram, and Flipping the Barrel on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. So we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.